And looking at the elections, especially when I see people already circulating certain mementos on social media about rhetorics coming from U.S. President-elect and Nigeria.
Yes.
What do you think will happen to U.S.-Nigeria relations going forward?
Well, a lot will depend. When you want to deal with a person like Trump, you can't deal with him if you are not confident of yourself. What put Trump there and the kind of person he is? I mean, patriotic nationalists, and that's the fever that's going all over Europe. And I try to urge fellow Nigerians abroad that it's a big lesson. If you stash your fortunes abroad, outside Nigeria, you are doing yourself an injustice. Because at every time in the history of the world, anytime there's economic recession anywhere, in any country, the first thing people look at are the foreigners and immigrants. Even Nigeria, at a point in time when our economy went down, we were taking it out on the Ghanaians. And that's when you had Ghana Must Go. When Ghana had a recession too, they drove Nigerians out. In 1930s, when Germany had a recession, it was the Jews that they blamed. In Britain now, what causes the Brexit? The Polish, the Eastern Europeans, other people have come in and competing for jobs. So it's a direct backlash against liberalism of state liberalism, when you allow people to come in and and globalization, as it were. It's the opposite of globalization. A strong voice in nationalism. Now, one of the things that Trump was campaigning for was trade deals that didn't favor the U.S., trade deals that gave concessions more to other countries. I mean, that's neither here nor there, and it depends on how it manifests. Because in the first place, if you improve the economy of people around you, then there's less reason for them to come inside your country to work.
But and speaking about coming in, sorry to butt in, those Nigerians who live abroad, who have their resources out there, have we given them any choice or chance to come back and invest?
That is part of it. We have, you see, that is the thing. You see, I wish this country could invest more in its own people, and I also think that we should review how we define our national interest. If you go to the Constitution of Nigeria, it defines that Africa is the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. That is a fallacy, and it is one of the most ridiculous things you can ever put in any constitution. Africa is larger than Nigeria. Africa, before we get to to Africa, I mean, we have to contain what is the situation within Nigeria. That particular policy was there during the apartheid regime. You first have to take care of what your country is, and the Nigerian people, the Nigerian person, right, especially the weakest, should be the focus of our own policy. What pays Nigeria, what pays us, and what could give us advantage, whether it's in trade, in economics, or in politics. So until we change that and demonstrate that we love ourselves, we have value for ourselves, we invest in our own people, I mean, nobody will respect you more than others respect yourselves. So I really feel quite, I mean, I don't blame anybody who goes abroad and who goes abroad. I mean, a number of us know people who, very patriotic Nigerians, who have had to go abroad because the conditions doesn't work, and they're marketable, and they can get jobs elsewhere. So I don't blame anyone. But the truth be told is that they should always have that at the back of their mind, that, you're only welcome to an extent.
Mark?
Well, definitely. I mean, we're looking at some of the protests. I mean, during that break, the protest was the report that we played. I mean, when you look at the response, or the speeches of the major actors after the elections, you listen to the speech of the president-elect, Mr. Donald Trump, you find out that he was a little more conciliatory in his speech. You listen to that of the U.S. President Barack Obama, you find that he's trying to tell the people that this is how democracy works. You listen to the speech of the candidate, Secretary Clinton. She tells the people, let's give him a chance. response. Yet, that did not dispel or diffuse the protest that we've seen in the wake of that election. Would you say that, you know, because for me the major question has been, is it okay for all that happened during campaigns to just be in the campaigns? Do you think that there will be consequences? For instance, how easy is it to get past the rhetoric of campaigning that was so divisive to a peaceful, united country after the elections have taken place?
It is not easy at all. It is not easy at all, and I think they have to live with it and manage it for a long time. Because when you throw eggs on the floor and the eggs get broken, I mean, it's difficult to put it back together again. The elections were very bitter. They were very caustic. Both sides, particularly Trump's side, whipped up a lot of racial sentiments, a lot of foul languages were used, and they said it with a lot of passion. They appealed to the base instincts of their followers. And that in itself, I mean, you can't open, I mean, what they did after the elections was won and lost is what you call what is politically correct. You know, to do the right things, you congratulate your opponent and you say this is the way things should work, we should, you know, we'll live together and work, you know. But a lot of people had, I mean, you could see some, there was a YouTube thing, somebody smashing his television and things like that. So when politicians need to be a bit more responsible in the way they communicate. You see, when you whip up sentiments with people and they become very bitter and impassioned by the things you say, you know, they go out killing themselves. In Nigeria here, we've seen where two different parties, they meet themselves because of the passion they have for their leaders. They kill themselves, they destroy property, and the next thing you are seeing their leaders drinking champagne together in some place reconciling. Look at the way our politicians have moved from party to party. A very good friend of mine, who most of us know, was in one party one day, and he said that party was, you know, planning to murder and, you know, other members of the party. They had trained 100,000 snipers. The next day, he was on the other party saying that party's hands were dipped in blood. So how do you reconcile that when you continue to make bombastic statements, continue to make statements without thinking through the consequences on people? You see, so the poor people are left there to keep on fighting amongst themselves. That's Obama there, shaking hands with Trump. But you go down to North Carolina and some of the remote areas, you would not see the two parties shaking hands. So you're right, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult, and that is why politicians should, how do I put it? Politicians should, you know, rethink that there is a day after tomorrow. There is a day that comes after when passions, you know, rise. Followers of politicians too should realize at the end of the day. But unfortunately, the American situation was so deep. The bitterness was so deep, or so caustic. It went into race. It went into, you know, sex, in terms of perception of women, in terms of very emotional things that, and this is probably the reason why it's good to be diplomatic when we speak.
You know, maybe, you know, because the world is also waiting to see which President Trump will turn up.
Yes, which of it? Is it going to be the presidential one? Is it going to be this reconciliatory one? Or is it going to be the one who just came back and said, let everybody go and stew, and that this is what he's going to do? Well, it stands to reason. But the American system has, well, let's put it this way. There are strong institutions in the U.S. that may even curtail what a president can and cannot do. And it is high time for the U.S. Government and institutions to be able to let the people know that, yes, Trump might have said all this and said all that, but there are systems on ground. Unfortunately, the Republican Party swept the legislative, you know, the National Assembly. But people should also realize that not everybody in the Republican Party, including very senior members of the Republican Party, supported Trump. Of course, they are in the elite. And don't forget, I started off by saying it was a conspiracy against the elite, which are largely in the cities. But to frail the nerves, to cool temper...
Well,
sorry.
Looking at what we...
Go ahead.
what we saw in the aftermath of Brexit, where it was saying that Britain had to defend that we're not racist, we're not xenophobic, we're not against people who, have come to contribute positively to build our country. Do you think that America will also find itself in that same situation in the wake of these elections?
Well, the British are slightly different from the Americans when it comes to that. I think the British are more sensitive to how they communicate. They're more sensitive in terms of how they manage conflicts and crises like this. Whilst the British situation, the Brexit votes, were also largely because of immigration, the emphasis was more on the immigration rather than on the race. There wasn't any pinpointing of different races and that. So the Brexit situation is quite different, and the way the British will handle things is also quite different. I think the fact that the parliamentary system, which it wasn't, a total election during that period, it was a referendum, particularly on a single question in the UK. The same party that managed the referendum, although the Prime Minister lost because the Prime Minister was on the no side, his successor, that's Theresa May, also drew in a lot of diplomacy and in managing it. In the first place, they said, well, we wouldn't go into this thing without following the process, both the constitutional process, the conventions, and a review, and it'll take time. Yeah. But it was a specific issue. Now the U.S. situation was more about, it's a different dynamic, although the same inclinations of nationalism and patriotism and taking back America for who they believe who owns America, So it's a question of all this issue of indigenship and settlers and migrants and things. These are very fundamental things in politics, things that we ought to start addressing in Nigeria as well, and knowing how to accommodate them. I've always said there are two major things that any nation needs to be able to capture, particularly nations like Nigeria. And when you don't get it, you wouldn't get it at all. You have to manage your diversity, and then you have to manage your mass. So managing diversity means that you appreciate there are different people in this country.
Not shutting one group down.
No, you cannot shut one group down. You cannot. You cannot shut one group down and be satisfied, no matter how minority that group is. Then you also have to manage the mass, the sheer population. So those two things have to be managed with a lot of skill and capacity, And you have to be accountable to both. You have to be accountable to the different people. For all means, there's something called dignified inclusion. Dignified inclusion. You include a man in contemplation of your policy and decision making and development, despite the fact that he does not think like you. So you give him space to air himself, and you accommodate him. And that's what civil society is all about.
All right. A fine place to anchor Mr. Shina Fagbenro-Byron, a development expert also of Mother Gold. I hope I got that.
Mother Gold, yes.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.